Welcome back to the College of Glycation, where we are trying our best to pull back the curtain and discover how sugar's sticky fingerprints are wreaking havoc on our biology. I'm your host, Paul Reynolds. I'm also a biomedical scientist and professor of cell biology. And today we're diving into a topic that's taken on new urgency in our post-COVID world. The focus here is glycation and the lung, or lung health. If you've been with us before, you know already that glycation is the process where sugars like glucose attach themselves to proteins, lipids, and even DNA. There's no enzyme that's required. It is a spontaneous reaction that in the end forms advanced glycation end products or AGEs. These molecular troublemakers stiffen tissues throughout the body. They spark and then exacerbate inflammation, and in the process, accelerate wear and tear across the body. We've covered their role in everything from arteries to most recently in the liver, but today we're zooming into the lungs, those delicate, balloon-like organs that keep us breathing. With respiratory diseases like COPD, asthma, and pulmonary fibrosis on the rise, and the shadow of COVID-19 still lingering for many, understanding how glycation undermines lung health is more critical than ever. Here is the connection. The connection between lung health and glycation is wildly underdiscussed. Yet it's a key player in why lungs lose their spring and diseases take hold. We'll unpack in this episode how glycation stiffens lung tissue, its links to major respiratory conditions, and the unique threat of inhaled AGEs. That's right, you can breathe them in from things like cigarette smoke and particulate air pollution. But of course, we'll end as we often do and discuss some practical interventions you can use to fight back. So let's get some air into this topic. First, let's revisit Glycation 101 to set the stage. When blood sugars run high, think, for instance, in severe cases like uncontrolled diabetes, insulin resistance, or if we have a diet that's heavy in processed carbohydrates, glucose won't just float around innocently in abundance within your bloodstream. It will chemically bond to things like proteins, including collagen, elastin, and other molecules, forming advanced glycation end products. These are not benign molecules that hide in the shadows. They're like glue that cross-links proteins, making tissues too rigid and too brittle while triggering oxidative stress. Those are the free radicals that cause cellular chaos, in addition to inflammation. In the lungs, this is a big deal because the lungs rely on elasticity to expand and contract with every breath. Picture your lungs as a pair of soft, stretchy balloons. Glycation, unfortunately, turns them into stiff, leathery sacs, less able to handle the approximately 20,000 breaths you take daily. This isn't just theory. Studies show that in diabetic patients, lung function, like forced vital capacity, for instance, or how much air you can exhale, drops significantly due to glycated collagen, reducing your lung compliance. It's like trying to blow up a balloon that's been left in the sun too long. And in a world still reeling from a virus that targeted the lungs, this hidden process deserves a spotlight. So let's talk about how glycation of collagen in the lung tissue leads to stiffening and reduced elasticity, a process that sets the stage for trouble. Collagen and elastin are the scaffolding and the stretchy fibers of the lung's delicate architecture. They are the molecules that allow alveoli, the tiny air sacs, to expand but also recoil. When AGEs form, they cross-link to these proteins, collagen and elastin, locking them into more rigid formations. This isn't a structural issue, it actually impairs gas exchange because it makes it harder for oxygen to reach your blood when these tissues are not as resilient. Research that focused on diabetic rats showed that glycation of lung collagen increased tissue stiffness by 30%, and that correlated with reduced lung volumes and higher airway resistance. In humans, autopsies of diabetic lungs revealed very thickened alveolar walls, with ages accumulating abundantly in that extracellular matrix. So there's a direct tie between high blood sugar and compromised lung function. Now, this stiffening isn't just a diabetic problem, that's for sure. Anyone with chronic high blood sugar, say from a steady diet of sugary drinks or processed snacks, can see similar effects over time. It's a slow burn, eroding the lungs' ability to do their job efficiently over time. So, this brings us to the links between glycation and some of the major lung diseases you've heard of. Let's talk about chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, asthma, and pulmonary fibrosis. COPD historically has often been tied to smoking, and it involves chronic airflow obstruction and tissue damage. Glycation amplifies this outcome by accelerating collagen cross-linking and fueling inflammation via the receptor for ages, or RAGE. In fact, the molecule RAGE is the fifth most abundant protein in the lung. And we'll get to some of that in a moment. Studies show that COPD patients have higher lung age levels, correlating with worse lung function and more severe emphysema. But please know that COPD is increasingly being found in non-smokers as well, and that's likely a condition made worse by glycation. Asthma is another disease, and it's marked by airway inflammation, but also hyperreactivity, and it also feels the glycation sting. Ages boost inflammatory cytokines like IL-6. Interleukin 6 is a key driver of asthmatic episodes, and it worsens, when it's abundant, airway constriction, especially in obese individuals or in diabetic asthmatics. Then we can also talk about pulmonary fibrosis. That's where scar tissue replaces healthy lung tissue, choking off its function. In this case, an overabundance of collagen at the expense of elastin is the culprit. And what it does is, in this case, glycation activates fibroblasts. Those are the small cells that lay down collagen, eventually causing scar tissue. And study after study shows that lung fibroblasts work in direct relationship to RAGE signaling, the receptor for ages, and their ability to bind ages. A study on idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis found that elevated ages in lung tissue was very common, with RAGE expression ramping up abnormal fibroblast activity. In the process, turning flexible lungs into rigid cages. Now, in a post-COVID era where lung scarring and long-term respiratory issues are front of mind, these connections are not simply academic, they're urgent. Now, let's tackle a unique angle in this case: inhaled ages versus the endogenous ones. You'll remember from a previous episode that endogenous ages come from within. They are born of high blood sugar or metabolic dysfunction. But what about inhaled ages? Exogenous ages, ages from outside of the body, have been discussed here previously, usually in the form of our diet. But there are also inhaled ages. They're external, they're delivered straight to your lungs via cigarette smoke, particulate matter air pollution, and even more recently, vaped compounds. Those are the electronic cigarettes that are all the rave today. Cigarette smoke is a notorious source. It is loaded with glycotoxins, preformed ages that don't need high blood sugar to cause damage. The slow and low temperature burning of the tobacco plant in cigarettes is a breeding ground for ages. These inhaled ages directly bind to lung RAGE receptors. Remember, the fifth most common receptor or protein in the lung. And in the process, they will trigger oxidative stress and inflammation much faster than their endogenous age cousins. Research on smokers showed that cigarette-derived ages accumulate in bronchial epithelial cells. Those are the small epithelial lining cells in the bronchi. And in the process, they'll amplify RAGE expression and chronic inflammation. Both are linked to COPD pathogenesis. Even in non-smokers, they're not safe. We've talked about this already. Urban air pollution, indoor air pollution, infectious molecules that are abundant, all of those are rich in volatile organic compounds. And those compounds can carry similar glycotoxins, though at slightly lower doses. Endogenous ages, meanwhile, build up slower but hit harder in a systemic environment, like diabetes, where constant high glucose fuels their production. Now remember, whether it's exogenous, eaten, or breathed ages or endogenous ages, both paths will converge on the RAGE receptor. When activated, a cascade of events, usually involving NF-kappa B signaling, pumps out inflammatory molecules that will damage your alveoli and airways. The takeaway here is that your lungs are under siege from both inside and out, and glycation is a common enemy. So what can we do in this case? Well, let's explore some interventions. These are thematic, we've discussed before, but they're very helpful in this case primarily. Antioxidants, diet, and breathing therapies can slow and even sometimes reverse glycation-based damage. So let's start with diet, the foundation to controlling glycation. A low carbohydrate diet, let's say for instance, keeping your daily carb intake to under 50 grams a day, slashes blood glucose spikes. Those are the high excursions of glucose that we experience. And in the process, we will starve out age formation. Studies show that low-carb, high-fat diets reduce systemic inflammation and therefore improve lung function in metabolic syndrome patients via the lowering of ages and oxidative stress. Antioxidants can be your next greatest ally. There are lots of compounds like alpha lipoic acid or N-acetylcysteine, NAC. Those both can neutralize reactive oxygen species. Those are the free radicals that ages unleash. There was a trial performed recently and published showing that NAC or N-acetylcysteine supplementation in COPD patients cut their oxidative stress markers by 20%, in the process improving their airway responsiveness. So imagine foods that are rich in vitamin C. Think about berries and leafy greens. Those are also things that can inhibit age formation because they can scavenge these free radicals. Then let's talk about some breathing therapies. These are often overlooked but can be quite powerful. Techniques like diaphragmatic breathing or pulmonary rehab programs are known to enhance oxygen delivery and reduce airway resistance. In pulmonary fibrosis, structured breathing exercises improved vital forced capacity by 10% in a controlled study, partly by reducing stress-induced cortisol, which fuels glycation. Now, these are not cure-alls, but they are practical tools that may provide some help. Let's continue to swap out the soda for water, pop in some blueberries, and practice slow, deep breaths with your diaphragm daily, and you'll see great benefit. Exercise and stress management deserve a shout out here as well. We've talked about this a lot. Regular moving, let's say, for example, 30 minutes of brisk walking or resistance training on most days of the week will help because that will boost your insulin sensitivity, thereby cutting the glucose supply that is used for age formation. This type of exercise also upregulates antioxidant enzymes. And for today's discussion, those enzymes protect quite nicely your lung tissue. Stress, meanwhile, will spike your cortisol, and that will raise blood sugar and inflammation, feeding this vicious glycation cycle. Mindfulness or yoga, the breathing exercises, all of those can dial this down as well, because study after study link meditation to lower inflammatory cytokines, indirectly easing rage-driven damage. So, once again, in a post COVID world where every breath feels precious, these strategies are your armor against a silent threat. We're at a moment where lung health is non negotiable, yet glycation's role remains under the radar. From stiffening collagen to fueling COPD, asthma, and fibrosis, ages are at the center stage, whether they're inhaled from smoke or vaping or born from sugary diets. These are the hidden drivers of lung decline. Remember, you're not powerless. Cut the carbs, embrace antioxidants, move your body, and breathe with intention. Your lungs, those unsung heroes, will reward you with every easy inhale. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in to the College of Glycation. Until we meet again, breathe deep and choose wisely.